I'm Emma Harrison, 32, and I never thought I'd be sitting alone behind a massive stone pillar at my sister Heather's wedding reception, practically invisible to the other guests. The sister I'd spent my whole life supporting had deliberately hidden me away like an embarrassing family secret. As tears threatened to spill, a stranger's hand appeared in front of me, confident, warm, inviting. "May I have this dance?" he asked. Little did I know, this handsome wedding crasher would not only save my evening, but would help me uncover the shocking truth about why my own sister wanted me erased from her perfect day. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, you know exactly what I was going through that day. Before I continue this roller coaster of family betrayal, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below and hit that subscribe button if you've ever experienced family drama that left you speechless. Trust me, what happened next at this wedding reception will make your jaw drop. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Boston, Heather and I were as close as sisters could be despite the 3-year age gap between us. As the older sister, I naturally took on the protective role. I remember walking her to her first day of kindergarten, holding her small hand in mine as she nervously clutched her unicorn lunchbox. "Don't worry, Heather," I had reassured her. "I'll meet you at recess." That protective instinct never faded. Throughout our childhood, I was always there for her, defending her against playground bullies, helping with homework, and sharing secrets during our late-night talks in the bedroom we shared until I left for college. Our parents, Martha and Richard Harrison, provided a stable home, but there was always something subtle yet undeniable about how they treated Heather compared to me. "Heather gets the new dress because she's performing in the school play," Mom would say. Or, "Heather needs more help with her science project." There was always a justification, but the pattern was clear. Heather was the golden child, the one with the perfect smile, the better grades, the one who needed more attention, more resources, more everything. I convinced myself it didn't bother me. After all, isn't that what older siblings do? We sacrifice. We understand. We make do with less so the younger ones can have more. By the time Heather was ready for college, our parents faced financial difficulties. Dad's construction company was struggling, and Mom's part-time job at the local library wasn't enough to cover tuition at Northeastern, Heather's dream school. Without hesitation, I took on 2 jobs, my day job in entry-level marketing and evening shifts at a local restaurant, to help pay for her education. "You don't have to do this, Emma," Heather had said. Her eyes filled with genuine gratitude when I handed her the first check. "That's what sisters are for," I'd replied, believing with all my heart that she would do the same for me if our situations were reversed. College changed Heather in ways I couldn't have predicted. She began surrounding herself with friends from wealthy families, adapting her accent, changing her wardrobe, even altering stories about our childhood to sound more privileged than we were. I chalked it up to normal college exploration, believing she'd eventually find her way back to who she really was. Then she met Bradley Preston during her senior year, handsome, charismatic, and heir to a real estate development fortune that made my marketing salary look like pocket change. The Prestons weren't just wealthy. They were old money, with social connections that stretched across the country. Bradley had attended private boarding schools, summered in the Hamptons, and never worked a day in his life that wasn't at one of his father's companies. After graduation, the distance between Heather and me grew from a crack to a chasm. Our weekly sister brunches dwindled to monthly, then quarterly catch-ups where she'd talk endlessly about Bradley's family connections, their vacations to places I couldn't pronounce, and friends whose last names appeared on buildings. She rarely asked about my life anymore. "How's that marketing job going?" she'd ask vaguely, barely looking up from her phone. "Actually, I was laid off last month," I'd answer during our last get-together, 6 months before her engagement. "The company downsized." "Oh, that's too bad," she'd murmured, then immediately pivoted. "Bradley's taking me to his family's chalet in Aspen next weekend. I need to buy a whole new wardrobe for the trip." I'd sat there, nursing my coffee, wondering if she even remembered how I'd waited tables to help her get the degree that had landed her, the PR job that had introduced her to Bradley. When Heather texted not called to announce her engagement, I pushed aside my hurt feelings and genuinely celebrated her happiness. I immediately offered to help with wedding planning, envisioning us bonding over cake tastings and flower arrangements like we always said we would when we were young girls playing wedding in our backyard. That's sweet, Emma, but Bradley's mother has connections with the best wedding planner in New England. Everything's already being handled, she replied. Months passed with minimal updates. I'd see photos on social media Heather with her new friends at her engagement party, at her bridal shower, at her bachelorette weekend in Napa Valley. Events I wasn't invited to. When I called to ask why, her excuses were flimsy at best. It was really last minute. It was just a small gathering. I thought you'd be working. The invitation to the wedding itself arrived just 3 weeks before the date, an obvious afterthought. No request to be a bridesmaid, no role in the ceremony, just a formal invitation addressed to Miss Emma Harrison and guest, as if I were a distant acquaintance rather than her only sister. I called immediately. Heather, I just got the invitation. I'd love to help with anything you need for the big day. Everything's under control, she said briskly. Just RSVP by next week. Despite everything, I booked a flight to Napa Valley, depleting a significant portion of my savings account after months of job searching. I bought a dress that stretched my credit card to its limit, wrapped a thoughtful gift, and arrived at the venue with my heart full of hope that this beautiful occasion would help us reconnect, that whatever had caused the distance between us would melt away as we celebrated her happiness. I couldn't have been more wrong. The Preston Harrison wedding was nothing short of spectacular. The ceremony and reception were held at an exclusive vineyard estate in Napa Valley, where manicured gardens cascaded down rolling hills covered with perfect rows of grapevines. White roses and lavender adorned every surface, with crystal chandeliers hanging from the open-air tent that could easily accommodate the 300 guests. I arrived early, nervously smoothing down my navy blue dress, the nicest thing I owned, as I approached the bridal suite to see Heather before the ceremony. Emma, you made it, Heather said when I entered. Her tone was polite but distant, as if greeting an old high school acquaintance rather than her sister. She looked stunning in her designer gown, hair, and makeup, flawless as a team of stylists fluttered around her. Of course I did. I wouldn't miss it, I replied, moving in for a hug that she deftly sidestepped by turning to adjust her veil in the mirror. Bradley's parents are very particular about everything being perfect today, she said, her eyes meeting mine in the reflection. They've done so much for us. I swallowed my hurt. I'm sure everything will be beautiful. Is there anything I can help with? Heather glanced at her wedding planner, who shook her head slightly. No, everything's under control. You should probably find your seat for the ceremony. As I turned to leave, Bradley's mother entered elegant in a pale pink designer suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. Heather's demeanor changed instantly, her smile widening as she embraced her future mother-in-law. Mrs. Preston, this is my sister, Heather said vaguely, not even using my name. Emma? I supplied, extending my hand. Lovely to meet you, Mrs. Preston said with a tight smile. What is it you do again, dear? I'm in marketing, I replied, not wanting to admit I was currently unemployed. Well, Emma works in sales, Heather interrupted. Retail. At the mall. I stared at her, stunned by the deliberate misrepresentation. But before I could correct her, I was being ushered out of the room. The ceremony was picture perfect, like something from a bridal magazine. I watched from my seat, not in the family section, but in the general guest area as Heather walked down the aisle on our father's arm. Her bridesmaids, none of whom I recognized from her life before Bradley, wore matching rose gold dresses. I wondered what had happened to Megan and Sarah, her best friends since high school, who were also conspicuously absent from the proceedings. After the ceremony, guests flowed into the grand reception hall for cocktail hour. I searched for my place card among the elegantly arranged table assignments. Are you looking for your seat? Asked a coordinator with a tablet. Yes, Emma Harrison. I'm the bride's sister. She scrolled through her list, frowning slightly. Harrison. Ah, here you are. Table 19. I followed her directions, walking past table after table of beautifully arranged settings, each one closer to the head table than the last. I continued walking and walking until I finally reached the far corner of the expansive hall. Table 19 was positioned directly behind one of the massive stone pillars that supported the structure, completely blocked from view of the head table, dance floor, and stage where toasts would be given. It might as well have been in another room entirely. The table was set for 6 but was currently empty. The place cards revealed my companions would be my great-aunt Edith, who was nearly deaf, my father's cousin Alfred, whom we saw once every decade, and 3 distant relatives I barely knew. I was the only immediate family member banished to this hidden corner. I sat down, fighting back tears as I watched the room fill with laughter and conversation. From behind my pillar, I could hear snippets of other guests introducing themselves. "And how do you know the couple?" someone asked nearby. "We're friends from Bradley's yacht club," came the reply. "Over there?" "That's the bride's sister," I heard someone else say. My heart lifted momentarily. At least someone recognized me. No, Mrs. Preston's voice replied. "Just some distant relative, I believe. The sister couldn't make it something about work commitments." My blood ran cold. Heather had told her in-laws I wasn't even here. When the waiter came around with champagne for the toast, he skipped our table entirely. I had to flag him down, feeling like an afterthought as he reluctantly returned with glasses. "Sorry, I was told to serve the main tables first," he muttered apologetically. I considered leaving, walking out, booking the first flight home, and pretending this humiliation never happened. But some stubborn part of me refused to give up. This was my sister's wedding, and despite everything, I wanted to be there for her, even if she didn't want me there for her. So I sat alone at my empty table, behind my pillar, watching shadows dance across the wall as the celebration continued without me, feeling more invisible with each passing minute. "This seat taken?" a deep voice asked, startling me from my thoughts. I looked up to see a man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit standing beside the empty chair at my isolated table. He was tall with warm brown eyes, dark hair styled in a casual way that somehow looked both effortless and deliberate. His smile was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way that immediately set him apart from the plastic socialite smiles I'd encountered all day. "Feel free," I replied, gesturing to the 5 empty chairs. "Though I should warn you, this is apparently the social Siberia of the reception." He laughed, a rich sound that felt refreshingly authentic. "Perfect. I've always preferred the edges of parties anyway. The view is better." He extended his hand. "Lucas Bennett. Emma Harrison. The bride's sister," he said. Not a question, but a statement. I raised an eyebrow. "How did you know that?" "The family resemblance is strong," he said, but something in his tone made me wonder if there was more to it. "Though I have to say, you got all the genuine warmth in the genetic distribution." I couldn't help but laugh. "Careful. Those sound like fighting words at a wedding." "Just an observation," Lucas said, taking a sip of his champagne. "So why is the sister of the bride hidden behind a pillar instead of seated at the family table?" "That," I said, raising my own glass, "is the question of the hour." The string quartet began playing a waltz, and people moved toward the dance floor. Lucas stood and extended his hand to me. "May I have this dance?" he asked, his eyes kind. "Unless you'd prefer to continue your architectural appreciation of this particular pillar." I hesitated only briefly before taking his hand. "I suppose the pillar will still be here when we get back." As Lucas guided me onto the dance floor, I noticed Heather watching us from the head table, her expression unreadable. He smoothly positioned us at the far edge of the floor, keeping us in the celebration but somehow shielded from my sister's gaze. "You're good at this," I noted as he led me through the steps with easy confidence. "I've attended my share of fancy events," he said, "though I usually experience them from a different perspective." "And what perspective is that?" "Let's just say I'm usually working rather than dancing," he replied cryptically. As we moved across the floor, I studied him more carefully. "So, how do you know Bradley and Heather?" "I don't recall my sister ever mentioning a Lucas." He hesitated. "I know Bradley through his family. We've crossed paths at various events." "You're being deliberately vague," I said. "Direct now. Are you a business associate? Old college friend?" "Something like that," he said, smoothly changing the subject. "Tell me about you. What's your story, Emma Harrison?" Normally, I would have pressed for more information, but something about Lucas made me feel safe enough to share. I told him about my marketing career, my recent layoff, and my complicated relationship with Heather. He listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that suggested genuine interest rather than polite conversation. "You helped pay for her college?" he asked, clearly surprised. "Our parents were going through financial difficulties. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time." "That's incredibly generous," he said. "Not many people would make that kind of sacrifice." "She's my sister," I said simply, though the words felt hollow given my current treatment. As we continued dancing, I noticed Lucas seemed to have an uncanny ability to navigate us away from Heather and Bradley whenever they approached our area of the dance floor. "You seem to be avoiding the happy couple," I observed. "Just giving you a break from family tension," he said lightly. "Besides, I thought you might enjoy actually being seen at this wedding rather than hidden away." When the dance ended, Lucas suggested we get some fresh air. He led me to a terrace overlooking the vineyard, the evening sun casting a golden glow over the valley. "So, mysterious Lucas Bennett, tell me something real about yourself," I said, leaning against the stone balustrade. "You've heard my sad story. What's yours?" "I'm a photographer," he said. "I travel a lot for work, capturing moments that tell stories." "What kind of photographs?" "All kinds. Photojournalism, nature, events." He paused. "Weddings occasionally." Something clicked in my mind. "Wait, are you photographing this wedding?" I looked around, noting his lack of camera equipment. "Though you don't seem to be working very hard if that's the case." Lucas chuckled. "No, I'm not the official photographer for this wedding. They have a team from one of those high-end agencies that specialize in society events." As we continued talking, I found myself drawn to his easy manner and thoughtful responses. For the first time all day, I felt genuinely seen and heard rather than overlooked or dismissed. When we returned to the reception, Lucas kept me engaged in conversation, introducing me to people he knew, making sure I was included. At one point, I noticed him tense slightly as Heather approached. "So this is where you disappeared to," Heather said, her voice carrying a brittle edge beneath the sweetness. She barely glanced at me before focusing entirely on Lucas. "I don't think we've been properly introduced." "Lucas Bennett," he said smoothly. "I was just getting to know your sister. You must be very proud of her." Heather's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. If you'll excuse us, Lucas, I need to borrow Emma for a family photo." As Heather pulled me away, I glanced back at Lucas, who gave me an encouraging nod. The family photo turned out to be a brief, tense conversation in a quiet corner. "Who is that man?" Heather demanded. "Just another guest," I said. "Why does it matter?" "It matters because this is my wedding, and I don't recognize him." She glanced across the room where Lucas stood chatting with one of Bradley's cousins. "How do you know him?" "We just met," I admitted. "He was kind enough to keep me company at the table behind the pillar where you had me seated." Heather had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. The seating arrangements were complicated. We had to accommodate Bradley's family's requests. "And their request was to hide your only sister away from view?" Before she could answer, Bradley appeared, calling her back for another toast. I returned to Lucas, who was waiting with 2 fresh glasses of champagne. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Just typical sister stuff," I said, not wanting to get into it. As the evening progressed, I began to notice inconsistencies in Lucas's story. He mentioned details about the wedding planning that a mere guest wouldn't know. He referred to Bradley's father's speech before it happened. And when I mentioned Heather's college graduation, he nodded knowingly. "You know," I said finally, after catching him in yet another slip, "for someone who claims to barely know the couple, you seem remarkably well-informed about their lives." Lucas looked slightly uncomfortable. "I'm observant. Or you're not being entirely truthful about why you're here." I fixed him with a direct stare. "Are you crashing this wedding, Lucas Bennett?" His expression shifted, resignation replacing his easy confidence. "Not exactly. But you're right that I haven't been completely honest with you." "Then tell me the truth. Why are you really here?" Lucas sighed, looking around to ensure we weren't overheard. "There's something you should know about your sister, Emma. And I'm not sure you're going to like it." Lucas guided me to a quiet corner of the garden. away from the reception's noise and curious ears. The string lights overhead cast soft shadows across his troubled expression as he pulled out his phone. "I was hired as the wedding photographer," he began, his voice low. "Originally, that is. Until about 2 weeks ago, when I was abruptly fired and replaced." "Why would they fire you?" I asked, confused by this revelation. "Did something happen?" "You could say that." Lucas scrolled through his phone and handed it to me. "This happened." I looked down at the screen to see a text message exchange between Lucas and a number saved as H. Harrison Bride. "Heather, just confirming our conversation about the photo editing requirements." Lucas, "I typically don't do major editing beyond color correction and standard retouching." Heather, "This is non-negotiable. My sister needs to be minimized in all photos, preferably removed completely." I felt the air leave my lungs as I read the words, my fingers trembling as I scrolled further. "Lucas, I'm not comfortable with that request. Family photos should include all family members." Heather, "It's my wedding and my photos. I'll find someone who will accommodate what I'm paying for." Lucas, "I understand it's your day, but I can't ethically remove someone from family documentation." Heather, "Then consider yourself replaced. I'll have my planner contact you about the deposit." I handed the phone back to Lucas, my mind struggling to process what I'd just read. "She wanted you to edit me out of the wedding photos? Completely?" Lucas nodded grimly. "That was just the start. When I pushed back, she revealed more of her plan. She didn't want you prominently featured in any documentation of the day. She specifically mentioned keeping you away from the professional video team as well." "I don't understand," I whispered, though deep down a part of me was beginning to connect the dots I'd been deliberately ignoring for years. "Why would she want to erase me?" "After she fired me, I was bothered by the whole situation," Lucas continued. "Something about it felt wrong on a fundamental level. So I decided to come anyway. Not to crash exactly, but to see what was happening. I've photographed hundreds of weddings, and I've seen family dynamics at their best and worst. But this was different." "So you came to what? Spy on my sister's wedding?" "I came to understand why a bride would want to erase her own sister from her wedding day," he corrected gently. "And when I saw you sitting alone behind that pillar, it confirmed my suspicions." Lucas hesitated before continuing. "I overheard the wedding planner talking earlier. Heather explicitly told them you were a distant cousin, not her sister. The seating chart had you listed as E. Harrison, distant family, while your parents were properly labeled as mother and father of the bride." Each revelation felt like another brick added to a wall that had been building between Heather and me for years. I thought back to all the social media posts where I'd been conspicuously absent, the events I hadn't been invited to, the gradual distancing that I'd attributed to normal growing apart rather than deliberate exclusion. "There's more," Lucas said reluctantly. "I overheard a conversation between Bradley's parents during cocktail hour. They were discussing how they were glad Heather didn't bring too much family baggage to the marriage. Mrs. Preston specifically mentioned being relieved that Heather came from a small, uncomplicated family and that she presented herself well despite her modest beginnings." The pieces suddenly clicked into horrible, perfect clarity. Heather wasn't just distancing herself from me, she was reinventing herself entirely, erasing her background, her history, her family, me. I was the visible reminder of the middle-class upbringing she was trying to leave behind, the living evidence that contradicted whatever story she'd been telling Bradley's family about her life. "She's ashamed of me," I said, the realization washing over me like ice water, of where we come from, of who we really are. "I think she's created a narrative for Bradley's family that doesn't include certain truths," Lucas said carefully. "And your presence complicates that narrative." Tears welled in my eyes, years of confused hurt crystallizing into sharp, undeniable pain. I helped put her through college. I've supported her my entire life. And she wants to pretend I don't even exist? Lucas placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Emma. You didn't deserve any of this." I walked a few steps away, needing space to breathe as emotions crashed through me. Memories flashed in rapid succession. Staying up late, helping Heather with school projects, defending her against neighborhood bullies, celebrating her every achievement, working double shifts to help pay her tuition. All while she had apparently been planning her escape from our shared history, crafting a new identity that didn't include me. "I think I need to talk to her," I said, finally, wiping away tears. "I need to hear this from her directly. Are you sure that's a good idea?" "Right now, in the middle of her wedding reception?" Lucas asked, concern evident in his voice. "No, it's probably a terrible idea," I admitted. "But I can't sit through the rest of this charade pretending everything's fine. Not after knowing this." Lucas studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Whatever you decide to do, I'm here to support you. We could leave together if you want. No one would blame you." I considered his offer. Walking away would be easier, less messy. I could process my hurt privately rather than creating a scene. But the thought of leaving without confronting this betrayal felt impossible. After years of being pushed aside, minimized, and now literally hidden, something in me refused to disappear quietly one more time. "I need to hear her say it," I decided. "I need to know why." "Then that's what you should do," Lucas said. "Just remember, whatever she says this reflects on her character, not yours." As we walked back toward the reception, I caught sight of Heather slipping away from the crowd, heading toward the bridal suite for what I assumed was a touch-up before the cake cutting. This was my chance. "I need to do this alone," I told Lucas. He squeezed my hand. "I'll be right here if you need me." I took a deep breath and followed my sister, preparing myself for a conversation that would either mend our relationship or break it beyond repair. But even in my worst imaginings, I wasn't prepared for what I was about to learn. I've learned over the years that family relationships can be the most complicated ones we navigate. If you've ever discovered a painful truth about someone close to you, you know that hollow feeling in your stomach. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you'd handle a situation like this. Has anyone else experienced family betrayal that left you speechless? Let me know in the comments. And if you're finding this story relatable, please consider subscribing to hear more real-life family drama stories that remind us we're not alone in these experiences. I found Heather alone in the bridal suite, carefully reapplying her lipstick in front of the ornate mirror. She looked flawless in her designer gown, every hair in place, the embodiment of the perfect bride. For a moment, I hesitated in the doorway, struck by how much my little sister had changed from the gap-toothed girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "Heather," I said softly, closing the door behind me. She startled slightly, then composed herself. "Emma, is everything okay? The cake cutting is in 15 minutes. "No," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "Everything is not okay." An awkward silence filled the space between us as I gathered my thoughts. I decided to start with something simple, factual, impossible to deny. "Why did you seat me behind a pillar, Heather?" She sighed, capping her lipstick and setting it down with deliberate care. The seating arrangements were complicated. We had to accommodate Bradley's extended family and business associates. "I'm sorry if you felt slighted." "Slighted?" I repeated. I was completely hidden from view at a table with distant relatives while every other guest had clear sightlines to the head table. "That feels more intentional than a slight." "You're making too big a deal out of this," she said dismissively. "It's just seating." "Is it? Because I think it's part of a pattern." I moved closer, watching her reflection in the mirror rather than looking at her directly. "A pattern of you systematically erasing me from your life." Heather turned to face me, her expression hardening. "What are you talking about?" "I know about the photographer, Heather. I know you fired him because he refused to edit me out of the wedding photos." Her eyes widened momentarily before her features settled into a defensive mask. "You talked to Lucas? He had no right to tell you any of that. He's just bitter about being replaced. So you're not denying it?" I pressed. "You actually asked him to remove me from the photos of your wedding day? To pretend your only sister doesn't exist?" Heather stood, putting distance between us. "You don't understand, Emma. Bradley's family has expectations. They've welcomed me into their world, but that world has certain standards. Standards that don't include middle-class sisters who helped put you through college?" I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. "This isn't about you," she snapped. "This is about me fitting in with Bradley's world." His family has connections that can make or break our future. So I'm what? An embarrassing reminder of your real background? The family member who doesn't fit your new narrative? Heather's silence was confirmation enough. What did you tell them about me? I asked. About us? About our family? She looked away, a flush creeping up her neck. I simplified things. Simplified how? I told them we had a small family, that Mom and Dad worked in business management. Dad owns a small construction company and Mom works part-time at a library, I corrected. That's not business management, that's blue-collar work. Work they did to give us opportunities. Heather paced the room, agitation visible in every movement. You don't get it, Emma. The Prestons aren't just rich, they're connected. Old money. They vacation with senators and CEOs. They have expectations about who their son marries. And the real Heather Harrison wasn't good enough? I asked. So you invented a new one? Without a sister who worked double shifts to help pay your college tuition? She flinched at that but quickly recovered. I told them you were adopted, she said finally, her voice barely audible. What? I felt like I'd been slapped. I said we weren't biologically related, that my parents adopted you from a troubled home when you were young, and while we care about you, we're not close. I stared at her, speechless with shock. You told them I was adopted? From a troubled home? It was easier than explaining why we're so different, she said defensively. Why you don't fit into this world? Because I don't wear designer clothes? Because I work for a living? Because I haven't erased who I really am to chase status and wealth? You could at least try to look the part instead of embarrassing me. Heather shot back, her composure cracking. You show up in an off-the-rack dress, with drugstore makeup, making small talk about growing up in a 3-bedroom house in Dorchester. Do you have any idea how that sounds to people like the Prestons? It sounds like the truth, I replied. Something you seem to have forgotten the value of. The door opened suddenly, and Bradley appeared, concern evident on his handsome face. Heather? Is everything okay? I heard raised voices. Heather immediately transformed, her brittle anger melting into a picture of bridal distress. It's fine, honey. Just a little sister talk before the cake cutting. Bradley looked between us, clearly sensing the tension. I don't think we've been properly introduced, he said, extending his hand to me. I'm Bradley. Emma Harrison, I said, taking his hand. Heather's only sister, who paid for her college education. Not adopted, by the way. Same parents. Same modest 3-bedroom house in Dorchester. Same middle-class upbringing. Bradley's confusion was evident as he looked to Heather. I thought you said your sister was adopted? And that she couldn't make it today because of work commitments? Bradley, it's not what it sounds like. Heather began, panic flashing in her eyes. What exactly is it then? He asked, his voice cooling. Because it sounds like you've been lying to me. I simply adjusted some details to make things easier, Heather insisted. My background is complicated. No, it's not, I interjected. Our background is perfectly normal. Middle-class family, hard-working parents, 2 daughters who were once close before one of them decided her real life wasn't good enough for her new one. Tears filled Heather's eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were genuine or another performance. You're ruining my perfect day out of jealousy, she accused. You've always resented that I found success and happiness. I don't resent your happiness, Heather. I resent being treated like a family secret, hidden behind pillars, edited out of photos, and lied about to your new family. I took a deep breath. I've supported you my entire life. I helped you become the person who's standing in this room today. And your thank you was to erase me. Bradley was watching Heather carefully, his expression unreadable. Is this true? Did you really try to have her removed from our wedding photos? It's more complicated than that, Heather insisted, reaching for his hand, which he subtly withdrew. I think I've heard enough, I said quietly. Congratulations on your wedding, Heather. I hope your new life brings you everything you think you need. I turned to leave, dignity intact despite the tears threatening to spill. As I reached the door, Heather called after me. Emma, wait. You don't understand what's at stake here. I paused, looking back at my sister, beautiful in her gown, surrounded by luxury, and somehow more lost than I'd ever seen her. I understand perfectly, I replied. You made your choice. You chose status over sincerity, appearances over authenticity, and new connections over the person who has had your back since you were born. I hope it was worth it. As I closed the door behind me, I heard Bradley's controlled voice asking, "What else have you lied about, Heather?" The sound of her stammered explanations faded as I walked away, a weight simultaneously lifting from my shoulders and settling in my heart. I had lost my sister long before this wedding day. I just hadn't wanted to admit it until now. I rushed from the bridal suite, emotions threatening to overwhelm me, and nearly collided with my mother in the hallway. Martha Harrison looked elegant in her mother of the bride outfit, though the worry lines around her eyes deepened when she saw my tear-streaked face. "Emma, what's wrong, honey?" she asked, reaching for me. I stepped back, suddenly seeing her with new clarity. "Did you know?" I demanded. "Know what?" Her eyes darted toward the bridal suite, concern evident. "That Heather has been telling Bradley's family I was adopted from a troubled home? That she fired the photographer for refusing to edit me out of the wedding photos? That she's been systematically erasing our entire family history to impress these people?" My mother's face fell, guilt replacing concern. "Emma, sweetheart, Heather is just trying to fit in. The Prestons have certain expectations, so you did know." The confirmation felt like another betrayal. "You knew she was ashamed of us, of our family, and you went along with it." "It's not that simple," she insisted. "This marriage is a wonderful opportunity for Heather. Sometimes small sacrifices? I interrupted incredulously. "Mom, she's denying our relationship. She seated me behind a pillar so Bradley's family wouldn't have to acknowledge me. How can you defend that?" "I'm not defending it exactly." She looked uncomfortable. "But you've always been the stronger one, Emma. You can handle this little adjustment." Better than Heather could handle losing Bradley. Her words struck me to the core, the confirmation of what I'd always suspected but never wanted to believe. In my parents' eyes, Heather's happiness would always take precedence over mine. My feelings, my dignity, my very existence as their daughter, was a little adjustment that could be sacrificed on the altar of Heather's social climbing. "You've always favored her," I said quietly. "I accepted it, made excuses for it, even convinced myself it was normal. But this goes beyond favoritism, Mom. This is about basic respect and honesty." "Emma, please," my mother began. But I was done listening. "I have to go," I said, turning away. "Don't make a scene," she called after me. "It's Heather's wedding day." I paused without looking back. "Don't worry. I won't embarrass the family any more than my existence already does." I walked away, unsure where I was heading but knowing I couldn't stay in that suffocating hallway another minute. I found myself in a quiet garden alcove, trying to compose myself, when Lucas appeared, concern written across his face. "Emma, are you okay?" he asked gently. "Not really," I admitted, wiping away tears. "It's actually worse than we thought. Heather told Bradley's family I was adopted from a troubled home. My own mother knew about it and went along with it." Lucas winced. "I'm so sorry. That's unbelievably hurtful." I confronted Heather. "Bradley walked in on our argument and heard everything." I leaned against a stone bench, suddenly exhausted. "I should probably leave before I cause any more disruption to her perfect day." "You didn't cause anything," Lucas reminded me. "She created this situation, not you." Before I could respond, a voice called out, "Excuse me? Emma?" We turned to see a woman approaching, tall, elegantly dressed in a deep burgundy gown, with the same strong jaw and confident bearing as Bradley. She looked to be in her early 30s, with intelligent eyes that assessed us quickly. "I'm Catherine Preston," she said. "Bradley's sister. May I join you?" Surprised, I nodded. Catherine settled beside me on the bench while Lucas stood protectively nearby. "I overheard your conversation with Heather," she admitted without preamble. "The bridal suite door wasn't completely closed, and I was coming to check on the cake-cutting delay." She looked genuinely troubled. "I want you to know that I had no idea what Heather was doing. Neither did Bradley." "It's not your fault," I said automatically. "No, but it matters to me that you know we wouldn't have condoned it." Catherine's directness was refreshing after hours of pretense and polite fiction. "Bradley is. Well, he's in shock. He's having quite an intense conversation with Heather right now. I'm sorry if I ruined their wedding day, I said, though I wasn't sure I entirely meant it. Catherine waved this away. You didn't ruin anything. Heather's lies did. She studied me for a moment. For what it's worth, I've had my reservations about Heather from the beginning. Something always felt off, like she was performing rather than being genuine. Now I understand why. You suspected she wasn't being truthful? I asked. Let's just say I recognize social climbing when I see it, Catherine replied with a wry smile. I've watched many people try to infiltrate our social circle over the years. Most of them aren't willing to disown their families to do it, though. Lucas, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. I should introduce myself properly. I'm Lucas Bennett. I was originally hired as the wedding photographer before Heather fired me for refusing to edit Emma out of the photos. Catherine's eyebrows shot up. Well, that adds another layer to this mess. She turned to me. Emma, I can't imagine how painful this has been for you. But I want you to know that our family values honesty and loyalty. What Heather did goes against everything Bradley believes in. I'm learning that Heather and I have very different values, I said quietly. Catherine surprised me by taking my hand. Look, I know we just met, but I feel like I should apologize on behalf of whatever role our family's status played in this situation. No one should feel they need to erase their past to be accepted. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched by her sincerity. Lucas cleared his throat. I think we should probably get Emma out of here. It's been a difficult night. Actually, Catherine said, a determined glint in her eye. I have a better idea. What kind of idea? I asked cautiously. The kind that puts things right, Catherine replied. Heather tried to hide you away and pretend you don't exist. I say we do the opposite. What exactly are you suggesting? Lucas asked, matching my skepticism. Catherine stood, straightening her dress with a gesture that reminded me of her brother. I'm suggesting that we stop allowing Heather to dictate the narrative. Emma is her sister and deserves to be acknowledged as such, not hidden away like some shameful secret. I don't want to create more drama, I said, though part of me was intrigued by Catherine's suggestion. This isn't about creating drama, Catherine assured me. It's about restoring truth to the situation. Bradley needs to know who he really married, and my parents should meet the real Heather Harrison and her actual family, not the fiction she's created. Lucas looked concerned. Are you sure that's wise? This is still their wedding day. Catherine's expression softened. I love my brother. He deserves to start his marriage with honesty, not convenient lies. She turned to me. What do you say, Emma? Are you willing to help me bring some truth to this wedding? I hesitated, torn between my desire to flee this painful situation and the opportunity to finally be acknowledged for who I really was. After years of being pushed aside and minimized, could I really walk away without standing up for myself? What exactly did you have in mind? I asked. Catherine smiled, a determined gleam in her eye. I was thinking we might make some adjustments to the seating arrangements, for starters. It's time you took your rightful place as the bride's sister, don't you think? As the three of us formed our unexpected alliance in that garden alcove, I realized that sometimes support comes from the most unexpected places. And perhaps, with Catherine and Lucas by my side, I could finally stop hiding behind the pillar where Heather had placed me and step into the light I deserved. This is your rightful seat, Catherine declared, pulling out a chair at the family table where place cards for Mr. and Mrs. Harrison and several Preston family members were arranged. She smoothly removed a card marked Cousin Philip and replaced it with one she'd quickly created using the calligraphy pens from the guest book station. The new card read Emma Harrison, sister of the bride. Are you sure about this? I whispered, acutely aware of the curious glances from nearby tables. Won't your cousin mind? Philip is backpacking through Europe and sent his regrets weeks ago, Catherine explained with a mischievous smile. Heather just kept his place card to maintain the table's symmetry. Besides, he would absolutely approve of this minor correction to the seating chart. Lucas stood nearby, having smoothly integrated himself into the reception by chatting with the actual wedding photographers. He caught my eye and gave an encouraging nod. As I tentatively took my seat, Bradley's parents returned from the dance floor, stopping short when they noticed me. Hello, Mrs. Preston said. her perfectly maintained smile barely faltering. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced." Catherine stepped in before I could respond. "Mother, father, this is Emma Harrison, Heather's sister. The actual maid of honor who should have been seated here all along." Mr. Preston's eyebrows rose slightly as he assessed the situation. "Sister?" I was under the impression that I was adopted from a troubled background and couldn't make it today. I supplied, finding courage in Catherine's support. "That's what Heather told you, but it's not true. I'm her biological sister. We grew up together in a perfectly lovely middle-class home in Dorchester with our parents, who are sitting right over there." Mrs. Preston looked genuinely confused. "But Heather said." "Heather hasn't been entirely truthful about her background." Catherine interjected diplomatically. "Emma actually helped pay for Heather's college education by working 2 jobs." This information clearly surprised the Prestons, who exchanged meaningful glances. "Is that so?" Mr. Preston said, his tone shifting from polite confusion to genuine interest as he took the seat beside me. "Tell me more about that, Emma." Something about his direct approach reminded me of Catherine, and I found myself sharing stories of growing up with Heather, the backyard tea parties, our shared bedroom with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, the summer I taught her to swim at the public pool. With each authentic detail, the Prestons' rigid posture softened slightly. "Heather was always creative," I said, smiling at a particular memory. "She once convinced our entire neighborhood that our basement was haunted just to keep kids from discovering it was where we hid Christmas presents." "That sounds like the Heather Bradley fell in love with," Mr. Preston remarked thoughtfully, the determined young woman with a quick mind and clever solutions. As we continued talking, I noticed my parents watching nervously from their table across the room. Martha leaned toward my father, whispering urgently as they observed my unexpected integration with the Prestons. Catherine, noticing my gaze, excused herself momentarily and approached them, returning moments later with my visibly uncomfortable parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, please join us," Catherine insisted, her tone leaving no room for refusal. We were just hearing some wonderful stories about Heather's childhood. The collision of these 2 worlds, the authentic one I remembered and the polished fiction Heather had constructed, created a strange tension at the table. My father, always more straightforward than my mother, seemed relieved to finally drop the pretense. "Heather was always our dreamer," he said proudly. "Emma was the practical one, feet firmly on the ground, while Heather had her head in the clouds. They balanced each other perfectly." Lucas, who had been discreetly capturing candid moments of this family reunion, paused near our table. "That dynamic makes for the best photographs," he commented. "Contrast creates depth." Across the reception hall, the main doors opened as Heather and Bradley returned from their private conversation. Heather froze when she saw me seated at the family table, her expression cycling rapidly through shock, anger, and fear. Bradley's face was more difficult to read, his jaw set in a way that suggested controlled emotion rather than the carefree groom of earlier hours. Catherine subtly signaled to the band, who transitioned into a new song. "Bradley and Heather should have their proper first dance as a married couple," she announced, skillfully redirecting the attention of the guests. As Bradley led a visibly tense Heather to the dance floor, he leaned down to whisper something in her ear. Whatever he said made her stiffen before forcing herself to smile for their audience. "He's giving her a chance," Catherine murmured to me. "Bradley values honesty above all else. But he also believes in second chances. Whether she takes it is up to her." The professional photographers positioned themselves around the dance floor, but Lucas remained near our table, seemingly more interested in documenting our unconventional family drama than the official proceedings. When the dance ended, Bradley guided Heather directly to our table. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry, her perfect makeup slightly smudged at the corners. "Emma," Bradley said formally, "I believe Heather has something she would like to say to you." Heather looked at me, then at her new in-laws, then back to me. I could see the calculations running behind her eyes, the weighing of pride against necessity. "I'm sorry," she finally said, her voice barely audible over the music. "I shouldn't have tried to hide you away." The apology was minimal, clearly prompted rather than heartfelt, but it was something. Before I could respond, Mr. Preston cleared his throat. "Heather, my dear, I think we need to have a frank conversation about family values, he said, his tone kind but firm. The Prestons have maintained their position in society not by hiding from humble beginnings, but by acknowledging them with gratitude and pride. Mrs. Preston nodded in agreement. My own grandmother was a school teacher from a farming community in Ohio. We've never hidden that fact. Indeed, we celebrate it as part of our family's journey. Heather's expression was priceless confusion, mixed with the dawning realization that her elaborate deception had been not only unnecessary, but potentially counterproductive. Bradley's father continued, "In fact, I'm particularly impressed by Emma's sacrifice in helping fund your education. That speaks to the kind of family values we respect deeply." As the evening progressed, a strange new dynamic emerged. Catherine orchestrated a series of introductions, ensuring that I met key family members and friends who had previously been told I didn't exist. Lucas continued capturing candid moments, his photographer's eye focused on the authentic emotions playing across faces rather than the staged perfection of the official wedding photos. During the father's toast, Mr. Preston surprised everyone by raising his glass not just to the newlyweds but to the entire Harrison family, whose hard work and dedication gave us the Heather we welcome into our family today. Especially to Emma, whose generosity of spirit helped her sister achieve her dreams. Heather's face cycled through several emotions as she watched her carefully constructed narrative crumble, replaced by something messier but infinitely more authentic. Bradley remained by her side, his expression suggesting they had much more to discuss when the public celebration ended. When it came time for the cake cutting, Bradley insisted that I join the family photos, positioning me right beside my parents rather than at the edge, where I might be easily cropped out. The official photographers looked to Heather for guidance, clearly aware of their previous instructions. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded her approval, though her smile remained tight. Later, as the dancing resumed, Bradley approached me, requesting a dance with his new sister-in-law. "I want you to know," he said as we moved across the floor, "that I fell in love with the real Heather, the passionate, determined woman who worked hard to build her PR career. Not the polished socialite she's been pretending to be. That Heather still exists," I said, surprising myself by defending the sister who had tried to erase me. "Somewhere beneath all this." Bradley nodded thoughtfully. "I hope so, because that's the woman I want to build a life with, not someone who's ashamed of where she comes from." As the dance ended, I caught Lucas watching us, a complex emotion in his eyes that I couldn't quite decipher. He approached as Bradley returned me to the edge of the dance floor. "How are you holding up?" Lucas asked quietly. "Surprisingly okay," I admitted, "though I'm still processing everything." "You've handled this with remarkable grace," he said. "Most people would have either fled or caused a scene." I smiled, realizing the truth in his words. I guess I found a middle path, being present without seeking revenge. "Sometimes simply refusing to be erased is the most powerful statement you can make," Lucas observed. Though I have to say, Catherine's intervention certainly helped. Across the room, Catherine caught my eye and raised her champagne glass in a subtle toast. In the span of a few hours, this woman I'd just met had become an unexpected ally and possibly a friend. As the reception began winding down, I realized that while this wasn't the reconciliation with Heather I might have once hoped for, it was something perhaps more valuable, a reclaiming of my own dignity and place in the family narrative. No longer hidden behind a pillar, I stood in the light, acknowledged and seen for who I truly was. And somehow, that felt like victory enough for one wedding day. The morning after the wedding, I sat across from Lucas at a small cafe in downtown Napa, both of us nursing large coffees and processing the previous day's events. "So," Lucas said, stirring his Americano thoughtfully, "how does it feel to be the star of the most dramatic wedding I've photographed in 10 years? And I wasn't even the official photographer." I laughed despite myself. I think star is a bit of an overstatement. Unexpected plot twist might be more accurate. "Either way, you handled it with remarkable grace," he said. "Most people wouldn't have been so composed when confronted with that level of betrayal." "I'm still trying to process it all," I admitted. "Part of me feels vindicated that the truth came out, but another part is just sad. Sad that Heather felt she needed to erase her past, erase me to be accepted. The irony is that the Prestons seem like they would have embraced the real Heather all along, Lucas observed. Catherine certainly didn't hesitate to stand up for you. As if summoned by her name, my phone chimed with a text message from Catherine. Family brunch at the Vineyard restaurant at 11. Heather won't be there. She and Bradley are having a private conversation. Would love for you to join us, though. No pressure. I showed the message to Lucas, uncertain how to respond. Are you going to go? He asked. I'm not sure. It feels strange to attend a family brunch with my sister's in-laws without my sister present. Catherine seems to genuinely want to connect with you, Lucas pointed out. And after yesterday, I think the Prestons might actually prefer your company to Heather's right now. That thought gave me pause. That's exactly what makes it uncomfortable. I didn't set out to replace Heather in their eyes. I don't think that's what's happening, Lucas said gently. I think they're simply responding to authenticity. After months of being sold a carefully constructed image, they're relieved to meet someone genuine. After considering his words, I texted Catherine back accepting the invitation. 2 hours later, I found myself seated at an elegant table on the Vineyard restaurant's terrace, surrounded by Preston family members who treated me with surprising warmth. Emma, we're so glad you could join us, Mrs. Preston said, seeming far more relaxed than she had at the wedding. After yesterday's revelations, we wanted a chance to get to know you properly. Mr. Preston nodded in agreement. Bradley is very upset about the deception. He's having a serious conversation with Heather this morning about the foundation of trust in their marriage. I'm sorry about that, I said automatically. Catherine shook her head. Don't apologize for telling the truth, Emma. Bradley deserved to know who he was really marrying. Is he considering annulment? I asked hesitantly, torn between concern for my sister and acknowledgement that she'd created this situation herself. I don't think it's gone that far, Mr. Preston replied, his expression grave. But Bradley values honesty above all else. This has definitely shaken his trust. Heather made a terrible mistake, Mrs. Preston added, her voice softening. But we all make mistakes. The question is whether she'll learn from this one. As the brunch continued, I found myself genuinely enjoying the Prestons' company. They asked thoughtful questions about my marketing career and seemed genuinely interested in my perspective. Catherine, in particular, engaged me in a discussion about digital marketing strategies for luxury brands that made me miss my former profession acutely. You clearly know your stuff, she commented. Are you looking for positions in the Napa area, or are you heading back to Boston right away? I hadn't really thought about staying, I admitted. I came for the wedding, and after everything that's happened, consider it, Catherine suggested. The marketing director at Aurelius Vineyards, a friend of mine, mentioned they're looking for someone with experience in digital strategy. The wine industry is finally embracing modern marketing approaches. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a call from my parents. Excusing myself, I stepped away from the table to answer. Emma, where are you? My mother demanded without preamble. We've been trying to reach you since last night. I'm having brunch with the Prestons, I replied. Catherine invited me. With the Prestons? She sounded alarmed. Emma, you need to be careful. Heather is devastated. Bradley is questioning everything about their relationship because of what happened last night. Because of what happened, or because of what Heather did? I countered, feeling my patience wearing thin. She lied to her fiancé about her entire background, Mom. She tried to erase me from her life. She made some poor choices, my mother conceded reluctantly. But she was just trying to fit in with Bradley's world. You've always been stronger than Heather, more independent. She needed this marriage more than you need. Stop, I interrupted, suddenly tired of the familiar refrain. I'm not going to keep accepting that excuse, Mom. Being stronger doesn't mean I deserve less consideration or respect. It doesn't make it okay for Heather to deny my existence or for you and Dad to enable her. Emma, I love you, Mom. But I need to set some boundaries here. What Heather did wasn't okay, and neither was your part in it. I took a deep breath. I'll call you later when we can have a calmer conversation about this. Ending the call, I returned to the table, apologizing for the interruption. Everything okay? Catherine asked perceptively. Family dynamics are complicated, I replied with a rueful smile. especially after yesterday. As the brunch wrapped up, I exchanged contact information with Catherine and several other Preston family members who seemed genuinely interested in staying connected. It was strange to realize I might be building relationships with my sister's in-laws independently of her, a scenario I never would have imagined possible before yesterday. Leaving the vineyard, I found Lucas waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his car with his camera bag slung over his shoulder. "How was brunch with the in-laws?" he asked. "Surprisingly nice," I admitted. "Catherine mentioned a potential job opportunity at a winery here. Are you considering it?" he asked, his expression brightening. "I don't know. It seems strange to think about relocating to the same area as Heather and Bradley after everything that's happened. Or maybe it's exactly what needs to happen," Lucas suggested. "You reclaiming your right to exist in the same spaces as your sister, rather than being pushed to the margins of her life." As we walked to my rental car, Lucas mentioned he was heading to a nearby gallery where some of his work was being exhibited. "I have an opening next Friday," he said hesitantly. "If you're still in the area, I'd love for you to come." I found myself considering it more seriously than I would have expected. I'd need to extend my hotel reservation. Or, Lucas ventured, you could use this week to explore Napa properly. Maybe even check out that job opportunity Catherine mentioned. Later that afternoon, my phone rang with a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Heather. "Emma." Her voice sounded strained, lacking its usual confident polish. "We need to talk." "I agree," I said cautiously. "What you did yesterday," she began accusingly. "What I did?" I interrupted. "Heather, you tried to erase me from your wedding, from your entire life." I panicked, she admitted after a long pause. "I got so caught up in impressing Bradley's family that I lost perspective." "You told them I was adopted from a troubled home," I reminded her. "That goes beyond losing perspective." "I know," she whispered. "Bradley's barely speaking to me. He says he doesn't know who he married." Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy for my sister. "What are you going to do?" "He wants me to start therapy," she said, "to figure out why I felt I needed to reinvent myself so completely." "That sounds like a good idea," I replied, surprised by Bradley's measured response. "Emma, Heather hesitated. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want you to know that I am sorry. Seeing you with the Prestons yesterday, being your authentic self, made me realize how exhausting it's been pretending to be someone I'm not." It wasn't a complete apology, but it was more genuine than anything I'd heard from her in years. We ended the call with a tentative plan to meet for coffee before I left town, a conversation I approached with cautious hope rather than expectation. As the days passed, I found myself extending my stay in Napa Valley, drawn both by Lucas's companionship and Catherine's persistent encouragement to explore local opportunities. The interview at Aurelius Vineyards went surprisingly well, with the director clearly impressed by my ideas for digital campaigns targeting younger wine enthusiasts. "Your sister really did a number on you," Lucas observed one evening as we walked through a sculpture garden illuminated by twilight. "But in a strange way, her attempt to erase you ended up creating an entirely new chapter in your life." I considered his words, realizing their truth. If she hadn't seated me behind that pillar, you never would have approached me. I never would have met Catherine, never would have considered opportunities here. "Sometimes being pushed into the shadows forces you to find your own light," Lucas said thoughtfully. "Not that it excuses what Heather did." "No," I agreed. "But maybe some good can come from it anyway." As my originally planned departure date came and went, I found myself imagining a new life in Napa Valley, one where I existed independently of Heather's narrative, building my own connections, and creating my own opportunities. The job offer from Aurelius Vineyards arrived in my email, presenting a concrete possibility rather than just a dream. "You should take it," Lucas encouraged when I showed him the offer. "Your talent is wasted on those Boston agencies anyway. And the fact that you live here has nothing to do with your advice?" I teased. He smiled, that genuine warmth reaching his eyes. "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't hoping you'd stick around, but this is a good opportunity regardless of other factors." As I considered the possibilities unfolding before me, I realized that sometimes being forced out of one story makes room for you to write an entirely new one where you're the main character rather than a supporting role in someone else's drama. And perhaps that was the most unexpected gift of all. Emma Harrison, Marketing Director. I read aloud, tracing my fingers over the newly installed nameplate, outside my office door at Aurelius Vineyards. 6 months after what I now referred to as the wedding incident, I could hardly believe how dramatically my life had changed. The sprawling vineyard estate had become my second home, my days filled with creative campaigns, digital strategy meetings, and the occasional wine tasting, strictly for professional purposes, of course. My small but charming cottage rental, nestled among the valley's rolling hills, offered views that still took my breath away each morning. "Still admiring your own name?" Lucas teased, appearing in the hallway with his camera bag slung over his shoulder. "I thought we had a lunch date." "Just appreciating how far I've come," I replied with a smile, gathering my things. 6 months ago, I was an unemployed marketer being hidden behind a pillar at my sister's wedding. Now I've got an office with a view, a job I love, and, he prompted, his eyes warm as he took my hand. "And you?" I finished simply. Our relationship had evolved slowly and deliberately, neither of us wanting to rush into something born during such emotional circumstances. What began as friendship had deepened gradually into something more meaningful: weekend hikes, through vineyard trails, cozy dinners where we discussed everything from photography, aesthetics, to marketing ethics, quiet evenings where he showed me his latest portfolio and I shared campaign concepts. As we walked through the vineyard toward our favorite lunch spot, Lucas updated me on his latest assignment, a photojournalism project documenting traditional winemaking techniques across California's diverse vineyards. "How's Catherine doing with the gallery preparations?" I asked, referring to our mutual friend's upcoming art exhibition featuring local artists, including Lucas. "Characteristically efficient," Lucas replied with a grin. "She's a formidable organizer when she sets her mind to something." Catherine and I had developed a friendship independent of her role as Bradley's sister. Her sharp intelligence and no-nonsense approach to life resonated with me, and we'd fallen into a comfortable routine of Sunday brunches and occasional shopping excursions where she'd help me navigate the social landscape of Napa Valley. "And have you heard from Heather lately?" Lucas asked carefully, knowing it remained a sensitive topic. I nodded, selecting a table beneath a sprawling oak tree. "We had coffee yesterday. Actually, Heather and Bradley's marriage had survived the wedding incident, though not without significant struggle. After 3 months of intensive couples, therapy, and individual counseling for Heather, they were cautiously rebuilding their relationship on more authentic foundations. She seems different," I observed. "More present. Less concerned with appearances. Therapy seems to be helping her understand why she felt such pressure to reinvent herself." "And how are things between you two?" Lucas asked, his expression gentle. "Complicated," I admitted. "We're not back to being the close sisters we once were, maybe we never will be, but we're finding a new way to relate to each other. One based on who we actually are now, not who we used to be, or who we pretended to be." Our parents had been another complex piece of the reconciliation puzzle. After several difficult conversations where I established clear boundaries about respect and favoritism, they had gradually begun to acknowledge their role in enabling Heather's behavior and my resulting hurt. "Mom called last week to tell me she was proud of what I've accomplished here," I told Lucas, without once comparing me to Heather or mentioning how I should be more understanding of her needs. "It feels like progress." "Speaking of progress," Lucas said, reaching for his phone, "did you see the email about the Preston family reunion next month? Catherine wants to know if we're attending together." The irony wasn't lost on me that I now had a more comfortable relationship with my sister's in-laws than with my own family in many ways. Mr. and Mrs. Preston had embraced me with surprising warmth, seemingly preferring my authentic self to Heather's polished performance. "We should go," I decided. Heather mentioned they'll be there too. Apparently Bradley's parents have been supportive of their therapy journey. "That's surprisingly enlightened of them," Lucas observed. Though I always thought there was more depth to the Prestons than their society reputation suggested. As we enjoyed our lunch, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. Had Heather not tried to hide me away at her wedding? Had Lucas not offered his hand in that moment of loneliness? Had Catherine not intervened with her bold straightforwardness, none of this new life would have been possible. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't approached me behind that pillar, I mused. Lucas smiled, taking my hand across the table. I've photographed hundreds of weddings, but I've never seen someone so clearly out of place, yet so dignified about it. You intrigued me. Is that a polite way of saying you felt sorry for me? I teased. No, he replied seriously. It's my way of saying I recognized something in you, a strength that shone through despite the circumstances. It drew me to you then, and it's what I admire most about you now. Later that evening, we met Catherine for dinner at a new restaurant in town, where she regaled us with stories of her latest business venture, a consulting firm helping family businesses navigate succession planning and internal conflicts. You should have been a therapist. I laughed after she described mediating a particularly heated dispute between brothers over their father's vineyard. God, no, Catherine replied with characteristic bluntness. I don't have the patience. I prefer to solve problems directly rather than spending years exploring their psychological origins. As dinner progressed, our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of unexpected guests Bradley and Heather, apparently dining at the same restaurant by coincidence. There was a moment of awkward tension before Catherine waved them over. Join us, she called. We're just finishing our main course. The Heather who approached our table was noticeably different from the bride who had hidden me away 6 months earlier. Her clothing was still elegant but less ostentatiously designer-focused, her manner more relaxed. Bradley looked more at ease as well, his arm comfortably around his wife's shoulders. Emma, Heather greeted me with a genuine, if slightly nervous, smile. Lucas. Catherine. What a nice surprise. We were just discussing Catherine's latest family business intervention, I explained as they pulled up chairs. Apparently, she's becoming quite the family counselor. She certainly helped ours, Bradley said with a meaningful glance at his sister. Though professional therapy did most of the heavy lifting. Speaking of which, Heather said, turning to me with unexpected directness, my therapist and I have been talking a lot about authentic relationships versus performative ones. I've been learning that authenticity is actually more valuable than perfection, Heather continued, a vulnerability in her voice I hadn't heard since we were teenagers. I spent so many years trying to become someone else that I lost track of who I really was. Bradley squeezed her hand supportively. We both learned some hard lessons about honesty and what really matters in a relationship. It hasn't been easy, Heather admitted, meeting my eyes directly. Bradley almost left after we returned from our honeymoon. Said he couldn't build a life with someone he didn't really know. But you stayed, I observed, looking at Bradley. I saw glimpses of the real Heather beneath the performance, he explained. And that person, the one who's passionate and determined and sometimes stubborn to a fault, that's who I fell in love with. Catherine raised her glass. To authenticity, however messy it might be. We all clinked glasses, the tension gradually dissolving into something more comfortable as the evening progressed. When Heather excused herself to visit the restroom, I impulsively followed her. Emma? She questioned, clearly surprised to find me behind her in the quiet hallway. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you, I told her. I know how hard it must be to dismantle the identity you spent years constructing. Tears welled in her eyes. The ironic part is that I thought I needed to be perfect to be loved, but it was my imperfections Bradley connected with all along. She hesitated before adding, I'm sorry for trying to erase you from my life. You deserved better, especially after everything you did for me growing up. We can't change the past, I said gently, but we can build something different going forward. I'd like that, she replied, genuine hope in her voice. Returning to the table, we found Lucas showing Bradley and Catherine previews from his latest photography project on his camera screen. The ease between them, the comfortable back and forth, the shared laughter felt like something I never could have imagined 6 months ago. Later that week, Lucas invited me to his studio to help select images for Catherine's upcoming gallery exhibition. As I looked through his portfolio, I came across a familiar photograph, me sitting alone behind the pillar at Heather's wedding, just moments before Lucas approached me. The contrast between my isolation then and my connectedness now was striking. Why did you keep this? I asked, holding up the print. Because it captures a pivotal moment, he explained. The moment just before everything changed. He hesitated, then added, I'd like to include it in the exhibition, with your permission. I'm calling it Before the Dance. I studied the image, the lonely figure, partially obscured by the massive stone column, the elegant reception visible only in fragments from that isolated vantage point. It's strange to see myself through your eyes. What do you see when you look at it? Lucas asked curiously. I see someone who didn't realize she was about to be set free, I replied thoughtfully. That pillar wasn't just hiding me from the wedding, it was keeping me trapped in patterns and relationships that weren't serving me. The following weekend, Catherine's gallery opening became an unexpected family reunion. My parents attended, tentatively rebuilding their relationship with me while making stilted but sincere efforts to connect with Lucas. Bradley and Heather arrived fashionably late, with Heather immediately gravitating toward Lucas's photograph of me behind the pillar. I watched her study it, emotions playing across her face before she turned to me. It's powerful, she said quietly. I'm so sorry I put you there. In a strange way, I'm almost grateful, I admitted. If you hadn't, I might still be in Boston, unemployed and stuck in the same patterns. Still, she said, genuine regret in her voice. It was cruel. It was, I agreed, not softening the truth. But look where we all ended up. As the evening progressed, I found myself standing between Lucas and Catherine, watching this unlikely blended family interact my sister and her husband, my parents, my new friends and colleagues from the vineyard, all connected through the strange series of events set in motion that wedding day. Who would have thought? Catherine mused, observing the scene with her characteristic directness. 6 months ago, I was watching my brother marry a woman I suspected was hiding her true self. Now, we're all here, authentic and connected in ways none of us could have predicted. Life has a strange way of putting us exactly where we need to be, Lucas replied, his arm slipping around my waist. Looking around at this unexpected gathering, I realized that sometimes sitting behind a pillar gives you the perfect perspective on what truly matters and who truly sees you, even when others try to hide you away. Family relationships are complicated, aren't they? If this story resonated with you in any way, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family dynamics in the comments below. Have you ever been overlooked or hidden away by someone who should have valued you? Or maybe you found unexpected allies and authentic connections where you least expected them, like I did with Lucas and Catherine. Your support means everything to me. So please hit that subscribe button if you'd like to hear more stories about family karma and finding your true place in the world. Give this video a thumbs up if you believe in the power of authenticity, and share it with someone who might need to be reminded that sometimes being pushed into the shadows leads us exactly where we need to be. Thank you for joining me on this journey from behind the pillar to center stage in my own life. Remember, your value isn't determined by how others see you, but by how genuinely you show up in the world.